What's going on, you guys? It's Johnny King here on another episode of the Johnny King Show. Thank you so much for tuning in. I have an amazing guest. I'm so privileged to have Ryan Michler here with the Order of Man. Ryan, thank you for being here, brother. Appreciate you.
Yeah, looking forward to it, man. I know we've been talking about this, for a couple of weeks or so, and looking
Yeah.
forward to having this conversation.
Yeah. Oh man, all your stuff between the things that I see online as well as it's just again the way you show up in the world is so refreshing. I kind of wish it weren't, unfortunately, but it is because
Yeah,
I feel
you
like
would hope that some of the things I talk about were like not something of notoriety, right? Of
yeah,
note
yeah,
that it was just common practice, but
right,
and it is, but it seems to me that a lot of what we address and what we deal with are dying virtues and a dying way of living our lives, which is
right,
unfortunate because I think it's
right,
the stem and the root of a lot of the problems we see in society.
right. Oh, some of those listeners that may not have been introduced to any of your work, just give a quick synopsis of Order of Man, Iron Council, everything that you're up to, and what kind of maybe even the catalyst pushed you into this line of work and this conversation.
Yeah, I started Order of Man a little over 5 years ago. I did it for selfish reasons. I didn't have any like noble pursuits necessarily. I just wanted to have great conversations with successful men. So I'm like, well, maybe I'll start a podcast. I had a podcast at the time. It was a financial podcast dedicated to helping medical professionals with their investments and things
Mm,
like that. And
mm,
I like podcasting. I love talking and having conversations with people, but I just didn't want to have that same old conversation that I'd been having for a decade at that
mm,
point.
mm,
So yeah, switched gears and started the Order of Man podcast and had some great initial guests and got a lot of traction up front and really noticed very quickly that we were onto something that was very advantageous and beneficial for men in society. And I think the biggest advantage that we had initially is that I wasn't trying to game anything. I wasn't trying to make anything up. I didn't place myself on some pedestal I didn't belong. I said, look, here's my struggles. Here's what I'm dealing with. I'm a dad. I'm impatient at times. I'm a husband. I'm not always as engaged as I'd like to be. I'm a business owner. I'm not as successful as I want to be,
yeah,
but that's the direction I'm going. Who wants to come with me? In the meantime, we'll interview some powerful men and see if they can impart some of their wisdom. And I've been doing that, like I said, for over 5 years now. And the growth that we've experienced has just been phenomenal, which is not a testament to anything I'm doing. It's a testament to the guys that have joined me on the podcast and the conversations we're having and
totally,
the resources we've been able to provide. That's it.
totally. Curious to those. See, I mean, it's. I don't see how it couldn't be possible, but that by just rubbing elbows with amazing guys, how have you seen your own, just you as a human being and as a man, evolved over those last 5 years?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not one to like. Well, let me back up. The reason I started this initially was to bridge the gap between what we as men know and what we actually do.
Yeah.
Because the things I share, it's not new information.
Hmm.
The guys that I have on, and we've had incredible guys. We've had like Jocko and David Goggins and Andy Frisilla and John Eldridge and Dakota Meyer. The lineup of men that have been on our podcast is phenomenal.
Mm,
But with all due respect to those guys, nothing they're sharing is new.
mm,
Like, it's all stuff we've heard before,
mm,
and there's
mm,
nothing I've ever shared on my podcast that a guy hasn't heard before. Now, I might share it in a way that resonates deeply with them, or maybe they're in the position to hear it, and so it's more impactful.
totally.
But ultimately, what I wanted to create was something that bridged the gap between what we know and what we actually do.
Right.
Because if what we knew actually is the only thing that mattered, we'd all have six pack abs and be independently wealthy, and all of our wildest dreams would be coming true because
Hmm.
everybody knows what to do.
Hmm.
So there's obviously a disparity, a bridge, a gap between what information we have and the wisdom that we have. And the wisdom is the application of knowledge.
Right.
So for me, what I've learned is just it's not enough to hear these guys' words or to read the books that are on the shelf behind me.
Hmm.
I mean, I used to take pride in how many books I read a year. That's stupid.
Mm,
Like, it doesn't matter how many books I read per year. It matters what information I'm actually applying.
right.
So for me, when you ask the question, how has my life changed? Action, just
Action.
transferring that information into, okay, well, what's the one or two things that this guy told me that resonates with me that I feel like I can implement on a daily basis. Like I'm not going to do it once, implement it every single day that I know will drastically and radically improve my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been able to extract things that have worked. I've tried things that frankly haven't worked for me. And I take the good and I leave the bad. And,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, as far as results, I'm more committed and dedicated in my marriage. I'm deeply connected with my children. My health is in a better position than it's ever been in my entire life. Even at 39 years old, I'm in better shape than I was 20 years ago when I was in high school.
Yeah.
The business is growing, the bank accounts are growing, the experiences are growing, my satisfaction and fulfillment is growing, all because I'm willing to apply the information that other men said, just do this. And you could argue whether it's just being dumb enough to follow it or smart enough to follow it, but I got my ego out of the way and I said, that guy knows what he's doing. He's doing X, Y, and Z, so I guess I'll do X, Y, and Z. And surprise, surprise, it's produced the results that I wanted.
That's awesome. It's really cool. I mean, I remember you writing a post somewhat recently where you talked about like the only two things that really make a man, if you will, or I think you said character and competence or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And so it's almost like well, which comes first? In hearing you say this, almost like, you know what? If you hear something that you think might work, you take action, and maybe through that action, do you actually start to develop the character within you, right?
Yeah, it doesn't matter where you plug in. So for example, if you're a guy listening to this and you think, okay, well, like I don't need all that intellectual stuff, I just want to lose 20 pounds.
Yeah,
Well, losing 20 pounds will help you with all that intellectual stuff,
totally.
right? Because you'll have the capacity, you'll have the focus, you'll have the drive, you'll have the energy to be able to apply towards other facets of your life that will help you become more knowledgeable, put that stuff into practice. So when I talk about competence and character, it doesn't matter. Like plug into one of them, and I'll take the fitness realm because that's the easiest. It's for men. That's the easiest thing you could do.
Right.
Like if you want to improve your life, just go to the gym every day. Oh, but Ryan, I don't know what to do. Just go to the gym and lift things and then put them down and then lift them again. Like that's it. Now you'll learn all the nuances. Like you'll learn, the proper mechanics and the proper technique and you'll learn all that. And you should learn all that. I'm not saying that you should just indefinitely go to the gym and just lift heavy things because you'll end up hurting yourself. But you'll learn that stuff. Just go to the gym. And here's why I say that. Because when you go to the gym, the set of characteristics and virtues that you'll develop by going into the gym, like grit and fortitude and resilience and sacrifice and dedication, are the exact same set of skills that will help you become a better father or a better husband or a better fill in the blank with whatever it is you're after. Now, the beauty of going to the gym is you can notice instantaneous results. Instantaneous. I guarantee every guy listening to this right now could go to the gym this week, 7 days a week, go to the gym, work out, train for an hour, even if you don't know what the hell you're doing, just train for an hour.
Yeah.
And I guarantee, without fail, that you will lose weight and or see more muscle development. And
No
when you notice those physical results, that will give you the motivation and inspiration to continue to do it. If on the other hand, I said, well, really, we just want to improve, we want to help you improve your marriage. And so here's 5 things you can do. Dude, you spent 2 decades screwing your marriage up. That's not going to be fixed in a week. It's going to take years, frankly.
Right.
So start in the gym, and then you can start transferring those lessons and those skill sets over. So that's the competence component. The character component is just being a man of your word, just being in integrity, doing what you'll say you'll do, honoring your commitments, living into those virtues that you espouse, bridging the gap between, like I said earlier, what you know and what you're actually doing. That's integrity. That's character. That stuff comes through, and it's reciprocal. They feed off of each other, right?
Right.
So your competence will help you develop more character, and your character will help you develop more confidence. They work harmoniously. It's not like a false dichotomy, and this is what I see a lot. Like people say all the times, Ryan, what's the number one thing that I can do to fill in the blank? I'm like, dude, it's not one thing. I guess I could say maybe plan your day would be a good thing to do. But if that's all you did, but then you never executed, then planning would be a waste of time.
Right.
So it's never one thing. And that's what we get in the habit of doing, this false dichotomy. What's this like Men's Health? You'll see this on Men's Health
Yeah.
magazine.
Yeah.
The 3 things you need to do to blast your abs and have this 6-pack of your dreams. It's like, cool, but if you eat like shit, then nobody's going to see your abs.
Right.
You just built. So you can't just do one thing. You have to be the total package. You have to do it all. And it comes in waves and it comes in incremental steps, but no false dichotomies here. It's like, is being a good father enough? No, it's not. Is being loving to your children and engaged with your children enough? No, you actually have to have income to be able to provide for them and put a roof over their head. Because if you're like, if you encourage them and support them, but you don't have any money to put them in football or to take that vacation so you guys can spend time together, then like, of course, that's limiting your ability to be a good father.
Right.
So you have to be the full, well-rounded package, and that's what we talk a lot about.
Yeah, I remember hearing you on a previous podcast talking about, and not even to go into, because I kind of don't even like the term, but toxic masculinity. You were saying it's more actually not so much toxic masculinity as it is like incomplete growth of a man.
Immaturity.
Yeah, and that sort of thing. That's more of what it's not a 1, 2, 3 step plan as it is just, like you said, sounds like what you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, you being in integrity with your word, and thus over that time you develop into greater levels of wholeness as a man.
Well, so here's when we talk about goal planning, a lot of guys will say, well, I want 6-pack abs, or I want to make 100,000 or 500,000 a year, or 7 figures or whatever. I want to go on this vacation. I want to drive this car. I want to own this house. And so they have these goals.
Yep.
Those are great. Like not one of those that I mentioned is wrong or inappropriate. Like you should want all of that stuff.
Right.
But that's where goal planning ends. It's like, okay, well, like that's what I want, so I'm just going to work towards that. Well, no, bro, like tell me exactly how you're going to do it. I don't know. I'm just going to like will it to existence. No, you're not.
Yeah.
Because if that were the case, you'd already have it.
Right.
So like tell me your plan. Well, I don't know. I don't really have a plan. Then be prepared for failure. Like you're not going to have that thing that you want.
Exactly.
So what we teach the men who band with us and join with us and work with us is we teach them, okay, well, start with that. Like Stephen Covey, start with the end in mind.
Yeah.
Start with the end in mind. Not like finish with the end, like start. So the starting point is what I want. Okay, I want the 6-pack abs. I want to be able to lift this much weight. I want to go on this vacation. I want to have this kind of marriage, or I want to be this kind of father. Good. Noble. Now let's work backwards. Let's reverse engineer the process. And what do you need to do on a daily basis in order to accomplish what it is you're after? And this is what helps you drive on in the face of lack of motivation or inspiration. Like when I go to the gym, and I do every single day, 7 days a week, sometimes I'm training twice a day. And maybe it's a combination of weightlifting or jiu-jitsu, but it's sometimes twice a day. Mm-hmm. I don't always feel like going. I went to the gym this morning to train jiu-jitsu. I didn't feel like going this morning. I felt like shit. My body was sore. I got up early at 5:30. I'm like, dude, I don't want to go today. But I went because I got my eye on the prize. Like I know exactly what I want, and I know that sometimes the mundane, the monotonous, the boring work is what's going to lead me to the results. So here's the beauty of this. Now I can just do the work, and I can just kind of in a way almost throw up my hands and say, look, I'm just going to let this take me where it takes me, because I know it will produce the results. Mm-hmm. I know without fail, and I can be patient. I've got a friend, Andy Frisilla. A lot of guys are familiar with Andy Frisilla. He calls it aggressive patience. Patience isn't about sitting back and doing nothing and hoping things come to fruition. It's like, I'm going to do this work, and I'm going to be patient with the results, knowing that if I am ruthlessly committed to doing this work, it is going to produce the results that it has for millions of men before me. And there's a sense of like ease in that for me. It's like, I don't have to worry about my trajectory or where I'm going. Like I know if I go to the gym every day, if I have a conversation with my wife every day, if I eat the right food, if I do the right things with my children, if I grow the business, if I send this email, all of that plays into the grander scheme of what it is I'm trying to accomplish. But I'm very systematic about that. Mm-hmm. Like it's not just happenstance. And I look back too, and I think, okay, well, here's my activity. And then I look, is this producing the desired result? No, it's not. Okay, I got to pivot. I got to adjust the tactics a little bit. I've got to change them up. I've got to be more committed or more dedicated. I need to ramp it up. So I'm looking at that, seeing what trajectory it's putting me on, and then making my decisions based off that.
What do you feel like is the disconnect between, because you have a great way of just distilling things down to being very clear and simple. Where's the disconnect between guys that are just getting in their way day after day after day?
It's the natural man is what I've dubbed him. It's, I mean, not literally, like obviously there's not literally two of us, but like figuratively there's like two versions of ourselves. There's probably an infinite number of versions of ourselves, but let's just say two for now.
Right.
There's the weak, pathetic, soft version of yourself. Maybe that's you actually right now. Maybe you're living to that individual.
Yeah.
And then there's the version of yourself who has realized his potential. And potential is a moving target. We talk about that in a minute. Because you can reach your potential every day.
Right.
Right. And then you reset, and then you have a new level of potential that you can reach tomorrow.
Yep.
Right? Like if I go in and I deadlift 400 pounds today, I reached my potential for today maybe, but tomorrow I should be able, and maybe by tomorrow I mean in 30 days if I keep doing the work, I should be able to lift 425 pounds.
Right.
Yep. So new potential. It's a moving target. So the disconnect is that we fall prey to the natural man, the weaker, more pathetic, softer version. And this guy lies, he cheats, he steals, he wants the results without the effort. He's weak. He's cowardly. He's pathetic. And I'm not pointing fingers. Like I have the potential of being that guy too. Or I have the potential of reaching my objectives and my goals and my accomplishments and my dreams and doing the work that's going to get me to that point. And every time I choose whether to jump on this podcast with you and honor my commitment or shirk the responsibility or sleep in or yell at my children or any number of things that I could do on a daily basis, I'm making a vote as to which man I want to be. Do I want to be this pathetic piece of shit? Or do I want to be this superior man? Not superior to other individuals, just superior to this natural version, natural man. And so the disconnect is that it's always easier. This is the law of physics, the path of least resistance. Right? And for even to go even further than that with a physics lesson, an object in rest will stay in rest unless a greater or equal force is acted upon it. Which means that sometimes, and this sucks, sometimes it takes us hitting rock bottom. Yeah. That's that greater force acting upon us to say, holy crap, I got to wake up and do something different with my life. I wish it didn't have to be that case, but this is a principle. Like the pain of where you currently are has to be greater than the pain of stepping into the uncertainty and the unknown and the work required to get you out of the version of yourself you're currently in. Right. Because if it's not greater, then you'll just stay there. And that's the disconnect. It's easier and you will inevitably fall. It's like like if you've ever driven, like where did you grow up?
In St. Louis.
In St. Louis. Okay, so I grew up in a small southern Utah town. I've always lived up until after I was about 12, 13 years old, small rural farming communities. And you get in like a rut. Okay, you're driving your truck in the rut, like the mud slides you into the rut. And it's really difficult to get out of the rut. In fact, the rut actually acts like a track. It grabs your tires and you almost don't need to steer. Like you'd almost take your hands off the wheel and it'll go wherever it needs to go.
Totally.
And in order to get out of the rut, sometimes you kind of got to crank on the wheel a little bit. And that's painful and that's difficult. But you got to crank on the wheel and give it some gas. And when you do, you can pop yourself up out of that rut. If you're not careful, you'll slide back into it. So you got to pop yourself up out of that rut. Now, once you get the momentum, and you got to get the momentum, daily activity, you get the momentum, now you can stay out of that rut. But it takes a lot of exertion at first. You can use the same principle when it comes to a plane flying. Like the time that it's most inefficient is in takeoff. Right? A plane's speeding up. It's got the friction of the ground. It's trying to take off. It's got the wind resistance, and it's got the forces that are acting upon it. It's heavy because it's got the most fuel that it'll have in the entire trip. But once it gets up to cruising altitude, right, less friction, less turbulence, lower air pressure. It doesn't weigh as much because some of the fuel has been burned. So once you're up there, you're good. But you got to pop yourself up out of there, and that's the most difficult time. But you get past that, And I'm not saying it's always easy because you got to maintain that
Yeah.
level, right? There's things
Yep.
you need to do to stay up there, but
Yep.
it's not as hard as taking off. I hope
Yep.
that analogy makes sense.
Oh, it makes total sense, and I think too, you're mentioning kind of leverage in there sometimes too. Just having the right type of brotherhood and guys around you
Oh,
to help
definitely.
raise you up and keep that standard high, or keep holding you, challenging you to another level. Do you have that? I imagine you have that in your
Oh,
community, or
for sure. Look, I mean, growing up, I'm trying to think of like who my heroes were,
yeah,
and my heroes were like Rambo and like John Wayne, and then you think even more recently, you think of like Jason Bourne,
yep,
James Bond. These guys are loners, right? They
mm,
work alone. They don't work well with other people, but they're Marlboro Man. You remember him? Like they're cool,
for
right?
sure.
But they're loners. They're not cool. They're losers because they don't get along with other people.
Yeah,
And in real life, those guys would not produce the results that they do on the silver screen.
mm,
It's about banding with other men who are going to motivate you, inspire you, give you the kick in the pants that you need. Because look, you could probably do it alone. In fact, most men do. You could probably do it alone. But I'm telling you, because I did this, and I'm sure you've done this too, it's just not efficient.
mm-hmm.
It's not efficient. And we are, as social creatures, I mean, think in the wake of this COVID thing, like depression is up, suicide is up,
Totally,
like people are distraught and put,
totally.
because they're not being social.
Yeah,
We are social creatures. There's a difference, though, between men and women when it comes to our social conditioning. Conditioning is not the right word, but just our social tendencies, I'll say.
yeah,
Is women work well face to face, knee to knee, they're communal, they're acting together, they're working, they're sharing resources,
yep,
and they're face to face.
yep,
Men work best shoulder to shoulder,
mm,
right? So we're going to stand shoulder to shoulder and we're going to turn ourselves outwards towards the enemy. And I'm not talking about a literal enemy, although it could be. I'm also talking about just the battle that you guys choose to enlist in together.
right,
That battle might be
right,
the natural man. It might be your weight loss. It might be getting a promotion or
totally,
being a better husband or a father, whatever that battle is. But we're banded together, shoulder to shoulder, either for a common good or against a common enemy, preferably both.
mm-hmm.
That you're working towards a better version of yourself against an enemy. In this case, who's the enemy? Your natural man is the enemy.
Mm-hmm.
And in a lot of ways, modern society is the enemy too. We can talk about that maybe or not, but there are a lot of things that we have to combat as men as well.
Yeah, yeah. Um, you mentioned obviously that just starting things off with physical fitness, health. That's the foundation. I saw it with my parents. Their relationship was couldn't even begin to be focused on, I'd say, because they were both so much out of shape and overweight until my mom
Yeah.
passed away, and then my dad lost a bunch of weight and all this stuff that came out. And I think it's easy as men to focus on their health, and then we can kind of figure out, okay, if I want to make more money, I can figure out how to make more money. What's not happening is a lot of guys, I feel like, at least in the community that I'm in, talking about relationship, although that's seems to be where they're hurting the most in some regards if it's not going well, or they want it the most. It's where the juice is, but they can't visualize. It's like, yes, I can visualize getting healthier. Yes, I can visualize making more money. What does that look like for relationships? How do you support men, or even just in your own relationship, find that vision of what you're aiming at, and what you can do to chip away at that ideal relationship, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I do. I do know because I've been there, and I know what it's like to be in a miserable relationship. And
Yeah,
my wife and I, about 11 years ago, went through a separation. We've reconciled, and we've got 3 additional kids since then, and
that's awesome.
we've got 4 now, and life's good.
Yeah.
But I know what it's like to be in that relationship, and the reason I think a lot of men struggle with this is because it's counterintuitive.
Mm,
So, what is what does your average man do when he sees a problem? He throws everything at it,
mm-hmm.
which is good. That's a good thing. Like, I'm going to throw all my attention, my energy, my resources at that thing. And in a lot of cases, that works really well. In a relationship, it doesn't always necessarily work out that well. Because what you end up doing is sacrificing your own well being and your sanity.
Mm,
So when a man sees a problem with his relationship, he gives her all the time, all the attention, all the energy, all of this, all of the sacrifice, all of the work, everything he possibly can, which is noble. It's dumb, but it's noble. Maybe not dumb. It's ignorant. I mean, and I don't say
Correct.
that in a condescending way. I'm just saying you
Right.
don't know better.
Just doesn't know. Yeah.
That's it.
Yep.
So instead, and here's the counterintuitive thought, you need to turn that attention towards yourself. Because if you pour all of your energy, time, and attention and resources into her and or your children, while it's noble, you will burn up and you will burn out. And when you do, she will be resentful and it won't work for you. Because what's going to happen, think about it this way. In a relationship, we both bring our energies to the relationship. Like I bring mine, predominantly masculine energy. She brings hers, predominantly female energy. And we work real well together. If I can't generate my own source of energy, then where am I going to get it from? From her. And so what a lot of guys will do is they'll say, okay, I want, and they're not saying this literally, but through their actions and their deeds and their words or distance, they're saying, I want you, my wife, to be the feminine energy, and I also want you to be the masculine energy. Well, that might be great for you for a little while, but now she's going to burn out. And we know this because she says things like, the spark isn't there. I'm not in love with you anymore. Or she looks for energy from another dude. Mm-hmm. And you're like, how could this happen? Because you didn't give her what she needed. You tried to, but you burned yourself out. So what we need to do as men when it comes to relationships is just turn it around and say, focus on yourself first. Not at the expense of your relationships, but you got to focus on yourself. You have to have time for you. You have to have time for your band of brothers. You have to have time for hobbies and activities and interests that are meaningful and significant to you, because when you focus to a degree, not all of your time, but to an appropriate degree on those things, then you get to come back into the relationship with your own external source of energy that she sees, she recognizes, she acknowledges, she appreciates, and she's attracted to, like moth to a flame. You want to be attractive? Then stop being so desperate for her to give you everything that you should be able to provide externally of her. Mm-hmm. And that's why it's so counterintuitive. I know what it's like. Man, when I got married, I ditched all of my friends. I ditched all of my hobbies and activities. And then when we went through our separation, you did the same thing. Every guy does this. Yeah. Because it's an easy trap to fall into.
Totally.
And then when we went through our separation, I was like, where's all my bros?
Yeah.
Gone. Because I ditched them. They didn't ditch me. I ditched them. Mm-hmm. You know, you hear that adage like bros before hoes type thing, right? Yeah. And I, short of saying that, I'm saying that you got to have a band of brothers.
Totally.
So that you can come back and be engaged as a father and a husband and the community leader and the business owner or the employee that you want to be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I so resonate with what you were talking about. And you mentioned the counterintuitiveness, which I have my own philosophies, and I've done other podcast episodes solo by myself with that whole idea of how oftentimes what brings success is counterintuitive to our initial reaction, right?
Right.
This is burning my biceps out and my desires to want to put it down, right? But if you actually want to grow, you have to keep pushing through that. What other examples do you think are, I guess, valuable to look at that are counterintuitive to what you see a lot of guys doing, whether it be success in business, relationships, health, just personal growth in general, that might be common for the natural man that, you know, that requires the counterintuitive approach? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's looking, like we talked about earlier, looking at the end result. Yeah. Without focusing on the lowest common denominator. Mm. The lowest common denominator is the things that we can control. And that's another one, actually, by the way, is that we spend an inordinate amount of time focusing on the uncontrollables. How's this person going to react? How's this person going to respond? How's the economy going to work? And President Trump and COVID-19 and all these things. And I have to force this square peg into this round hole. It's like, hold up, dude. Like, you can't control any of that. You know, take the economy, for example. And people are like, oh, well, the economy, what should I do? Oh, try focusing on your own personal economy first.
Yeah.
My background's financial planning. So that's what I tell people is like, look, you're all worried about the stock market. Like, are you developing skills to make more money? No. When's the last time you asked for a raise or promotion? Oh, it's been 10 years. Like, you're worried about the stock market. You go to your boss right now, or even debt, for example. It's like, okay, you want an 8, 10, 12% return in the market. You're paying 15% on that credit card right now. I just pay that off. And there's a guaranteed 15% rate of return. Oh, well, I don't know if I can do that. That's what I'm saying. Like, you can't control what the market's going to do, but you can control whether or not you pay off your credit card payment or your car loan or not make stupid purchases, things you can't afford. So, like, do that instead.
Mm-hmm.
So what I would suggest to men is, like, realize, okay, and I fall prey to this all the time. It's like, and my wife will even tell me, she's like, is there anything you can do about it right now? No. She says, then don't worry about it. Easier said than done, of
Easier
course,
said than
right?
done. Yep.
Yeah, of course. It's always easier to say things than to do things.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
But that's true. Like, if there's nothing you can do about it, nothing. There's no action you can take. There's no amount of worry. There's no amount of sleepless nights that are going to improve that situation. So when you come across something like that and you ask yourself, is there something I can do about this? And the answer is no. Say, okay, there's a follow-up question to that. That's not the end of the thing. The follow-up question is, what can I control? Man, I just lost a bunch of money in the market. What can I control? Well, I can put more money into the stock market while stocks are low. I can control that. Yes, you can. And so you do that and you notice the stocks rebound because it's all cyclical and things are fine. Things play out.
Yeah.
So stop focusing on the things, the big things that are outside of your control, and focus on the little things that are within your control. And those big things will begin to work themselves out.
In a different way, it reminds me of that scene from Braveheart where young William Wallace is at his father's funeral and his uncle comes up and he says, I'll first teach you how to use your mind, before I'll teach you how to use the sword. And I feel like that's pretty applicable, I'd say, to us as men today, especially in teaching future generations how to do that too. How do you see just your own evolution as a man translate into how you're becoming a healthier and more well-rounded father with your kids?
So I like that scene. Braveheart's one of my favorite movies, and when I think about that scene, I think about the difference between responding and reacting. The sword is reaction.
Totally.
And it's usually driven by emotion. Like, I'm pissed. I want to avenge. I'm going to go slay people, right? Like that's emotionally charged. Sometimes that's actually appropriate. I'm not saying that your emotions are inappropriate. We all experience emotions. But by the way, there's no bad emotions.
Right.
Like, people will say, oh, anger. You don't want to be angry. Why? Like, there's some actually things that you should be angry about.
Yeah.
And sometimes anger is the appropriate emotion to be experiencing and feeling. So there's nothing bad about it. It's your inability to decipher its meaning and then use your logical side, which is response, not reaction, response, to harness the emotion. Because look, the emotion is just, it's like a dashboard on your vehicle, right? You're driving down the road, you look down, you've got your odometer, you've got the engine heat, you've got, and I'm not a mechanic by any means, you've got your gas gauge, you've got all this stuff, right?
The stuff, yeah.
Yeah, the stuff. You guys know what I'm talking about. You're driving down the road and you hear this binging, right, on your dashboard. You look down and you see, oh, my gas tank's empty. You're not pissed off at the fuel gauge. What do? You're like, oh, I got to find a gas station. So you find the next gas station, you pull off and you fill up gas and then you get back on the road and think. That's what emotions are. It's like, there's something wrong. Something's happening. Hold on. Oh, we got to react. We got to do something. And then you're like, okay, I'm angry. And I'm angry because of X, Y, and Z. And here's how I can fix X, Y, and Z, which is the equivalent of filling up your tank. And so you do those X, Y, and Z, and then you get back on the road and back on with your life. So the sword versus the mind is emotion versus logic. Both are appropriate at times, and both have their role. You're going to be more effective with the sword if you can use your mind. And
Right.
again, that's the distinction between the reactionary and the responsive.
Yeah. I love it. So besides Braveheart, what's another really good movie that you love?
It's all along the same thread line. Gladiator, of
Yep.
course, is a good
Yep.
one. Saving Private Ryan, it's a good movie. It's all along those.
Yeah.
It's always along those lines.
The same. 300 for me.
Yeah,
I like the
300. Yeah, it's a good one
I like
for sure.
Matrix, just how he comes into believing in himself, and then just
Yep.
kicking ass.
Yep.
Um, absolutely, I love all those. Um, well, you, I guess you're talking about fathering and just I feel like a big part of why men are the way they are, and why we're struggling, and I can speak de- deeply for myself, was growing up without a father. He was there. He just wasn't presently there. He was a workaholic, and he had 5 kids, and he was running from his own demons and stuff like that. Um, but for so many of us men, I'm speaking to all of my other brothers who kind of grew up without a father. It's like, man, there's that wound that needs to be healed so that we can be better husbands and fathers and all those other things. And you think it's just pretty much doing what you're talking about, in terms of just fundamentally taking care of the next best thing for today, just building off of those, just creating momentum, getting out of the rut, right? And over time, that creates just character development. What's the philosophy, or how do you see? I don't want to put words in your mouth, obviously, because I don't know exactly how you feel, but do you know what I'm talking about in terms of fatherless men
Yeah.
out there? How do they get back to wholeness?
Uh, Grace.
Grace.
That's what it is.
I
Grace.
love it. I love
Like
it.
a lot of us have placed our fathers on pedestals they don't belong. Yeah, I
Yeah.
grew up without a father in my home as well. My dad and my mom separated when I was 3 years old. We had a good relationship. I saw him every summer between school years and things like that. I had some stepfathers come into my life, and so for a long time, I held a lot of like bitterness and animosity against my father for not being
Same.
around
Same.
because I put him on this pedestal. I'm like, he's my hero. Like he is the superhero, and that wasn't fair to him. Because now, as a father of 4 myself, I'm like, holy cow! Like I don't belong on any pedestal they may put me on.
Yeah.
I'm full of flaws and gaps and holes. And so you ask yourself, how do you make yourself whole? It's not actually his responsibility.
Yeah.
I mean, my dad passed away a couple of years ago. So, like, literally, that can't happen. There's nothing he can do to fill any sort of hole.
Sure.
So the hole has to be filled with, like, there's this really interesting concept in my church about the distinction between justice and mercy. Like, justice has to be served, right? It has to be served. And I don't want to get religious necessarily, but in the context of spirituality and religion, justice has to be served. Like, the sins that we have to be paid for. That's justice. Well, Jesus Christ came and offered justice by paying for those sins, but he also extended mercy by taking upon those sins himself. So now justice was served, the price was paid through his atoning sacrifice, and he extended mercy to us so that we would not have to carry that weight ourselves. So again, I don't want to get all religious and spiritual, but think about that in the context of the relationship with your father. How can justice be served? How can you reconcile? So the actual word, if you look at the definition of the word atonement, it's to reconcile, it's to make whole, it's to make right. So we hear atonement, we think of the religious perspective, but it's not a religious word. It's just the atonement. It's making whole. So how does a man atone with his father? Through mercy. You have to afford him some grace. He's a human being, full of flaws. He had his own baggage, his own shit, and his own things that he had to deal with. And you know what? Maybe you're looking at his performance through your own lens, through your own baggage, and saying, well, he did this because of X, Y, and Z. That's a story that you made up. You don't know if that's true.
Totally.
So a lot of guys will say, well, my dad was never around. Well, where was he? Well, he's at work. Okay, well, maybe he was at work because he thinks that providing for you is the best way that he can show up as a man. So rather than saying, oh, my dad never made any of my baseball games, maybe instead the right narrative is, man, I'm so blessed that my father worked his ass off so that he could afford the tuition or the payments to always have the best gear so that I could always play baseball and be involved with other boys and community members and competitive sports.
Yep. Amen.
Either one of those could be right or wrong. Like you're
Yep.
just making shit up. So if you're going to make up a story about your dad, then give it some grace and just make up the story that actually serves him and you better, which is, hey, he did the best he could do.
Mm-hmm.
Justice is served, mercy and grace is afforded.
Mm.
This is how we atone with our fathers, and this is how we make ourselves whole.
Love that. I mean, again, I resonate with that just because I was so angry, so bitter with my father, provoked him coming out of the closet after my mom had passed away. And in
Mm,
that moment, did my heart just fill with empathy and grace, if you will. And I kind of think about as of grace, a definition kind of like you're just kind of forgetting, or not forgetting, you're just letting go of any sense of keeping score. Because I had
right.
had him in the hole massively because he was not fulfilling what I had hoped he would have been as a father at all these
Expectations,
expectations. Yep.
pedestal.
Yep, yep, yep. And when I let go of that score, and I just started to love him as another human being, who had his own, just exactly. I'm just kind of piggybacking what you said. Then, man, like over the last 12 years, he's now one of my best friends. Talk to him almost every
Mm-hmm.
single day. It allowed that space to heal so massively, and allow me then to actually give grace for myself because I
Right.
was so much of that negative energy was actually impacting my my failed marriage and how I was showing up. And then it was like cast on him. And when I let that go, then I could give myself grace and I can let that go. So I think that's the next level. I mean, we can talk about, yeah, win the day, get out of bed, do some meditation, work out. But there's also that next level of like, look at your wounds, look at the baggage, look at the stories that you're talking about that you've made up about shit, and question if that's really fact or is it just a story.
Right. It's just you're looking at it through one lens.
Yeah.
Just look at it through a different lens. You don't even have to accept that lens. Just look at it for a second.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just look. And then you can make your decision from there. I actually made a post on Instagram today about my oldest son, and I said something to the effect of no great kingdom has two kings. And so it's as you as a man who has a wife and kids and a career and goals and ambitions, if you're still serving in your father's kingdom, like of course there's gonna be contention and animosity. That's
Yeah.
his kingdom.
Yeah.
You're a visitor in his kingdom. Like go out and start your own. Like go on your own conquest, develop your own realm, if you will, and
Yep.
become your own king
Yep.
of your space.
Mm-hmm.
So he can go rule his kingdom, and you can go rule yours the way that you see fit with other influences and a portion of his influence as well. But a lot of us grown men are acting like, to go on the same thread line here, are acting like princes of our father's kingdom. Like
Mm-hmm.
you're not a prince anymore. You're a grown man. Like go
Yep.
out and get your own kingdom
Yeah.
and leave his realm to go start your own.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting because I when I emailed you initially, I'm in the middle and why I wanted to have this conversation because I wanted to get some good nuggets that I can put in my book. This book is about becoming kings, and it's the whole idea of
Mm,
like the natural man I saw of me showing up was Robert the Bruce, trying
mm,
playing politics and listening to my dad and trying to make everyone happy and being passive and ultimately stabbing, the back metaphorically of that who I respect the most, which is William Wallace. Then you have William Wallace who, you know, doesn't have his dad and he's his own man, and he's solid and he's his man of his word and he's a leader. And like, that's what I aspire to be. But I saw myself as Robert the Bruce, if that makes sense.
yeah, it's a good analogy. You even think about it in that context is like it wasn't aspiring to be necessarily like or to be another man, but to see who he had the potential to become.
Mm-hmm.
So this is again the two selves, right? The natural man, the
Yeah.
Robert the Bruce, right?
Yep. Yep.
And then I can be that guy, or I can be my own William Wallace, right? Who's
Mm-hmm.
free and liberated and principled and capable and has character.
Mm-hmm.
And you see yourself in him. Because you remember in that movie when William Wallace says something to the effect of, if you do this, then people will follow you, and so will I. So Robert the Bruce saw the potential of who he could become, a leader
Totally.
of himself and other men.
Totally.
But he could never let go of until the end. He could never let go until that catastrophic event, right?
Yeah.
Where
Yeah.
he was like shaken out of that situation.
Yeah.
He couldn't step out from underneath his father's shadow.
Yeah. Yeah. Which I feel like you said, sometimes it takes hitting that ground zero. For me, it was losing my mom, my dad, then the fair marriage. I was like, okay, that way doesn't work anymore.
Right.
So
Right.
time to level up, or what's
I
the
wish we
point?
could learn those lessons without having to hit that rock bottom. I mean, it
Yeah.
sucks, but
Yeah, it does. And yet, it's like, it also is what cultivates, and it's the catalyst for so much. I would
it
not be
is.
where I am. I wouldn't be talking to you today if it weren't for
Yeah.
those cataclysmic things. So I kind of
Right.
feel like it's driven by tough love in some regards. Like, this may
Yeah.
not be what you want, but this is actually what you truly need.
Yeah. Tough love and stupid choices.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
I
lots of
mean, like if
insecurity. Yeah,
I mean, that's the reality is like sometimes you just make a dumb choice and there's no way to absolve yourself or a
yeah,
series of choices and there's no
yeah,
way to absolve yourself of the consequences of those choices.
yeah,
The
yeah,
best we can do is, and people will say this all the time is like, man, how do I get over past regret? Stop dwelling on it.
yeah,
Figure out what you learned,
yeah,
apply those lessons, and then become a new individual because of those experiences.
yeah, yeah,
If you just live in the past, you're like, oh man, I messed this up. I messed my marriage up, or I messed up the relationship with my kid, or this or that. You're just living back there. It's like,
yeah.
okay, it's done is done. Like, what did you learn? How are you better? Well, I'm not better. Okay, well then you're never gonna grow
Right,
until you're willing to look at it and say, oh, that sucked. That was painful. Here's what I learned. Here's the lesson I learned. Okay, now I can move forward.
right,
That's
right.
how you get over that stuff.
Allowing yourself to divorce yourself from the past or the past stories and actually marry the truth of moving forward, I think is
Right.
what you're saying. And
Yeah,
otherwise, what's
James
the
Clear
point?
talks about it in his book Atomic Habits. He says
Mm-hmm.
every day you make choices and decisions, and every choice that you make is a vote towards the type of individual you want to become. I think he talks about it in the context of being a writer. So a lot of people say, for example, I want to write a book. You're talking about writing a book, but I'm not a writer. Well, you're a writer if you write.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when you sit down at your computer and you write 1,000 or 10,000 words,
Yeah.
then what you're doing is you're actually making a vote with your actions to confirm that you are indeed a writer. Now, you may not be the most proficient at it yet,
Not
but
yet.
you are by definition, you are writing words, therefore you are a writer. Oh man, I'm just not a runner. Yes, you're not a runner because you never run. But if you go run a mile today, then by definition, you are a runner.
Mm-hmm.
And tomorrow you get up and you run another mile and another mile. And the next week it's a mile and a half. And then the next week it's 2 miles. You become a runner by doing the activity. It's funny. I had a conversation years ago with Jocko, and he was one of the first big guests that I've had on the podcast. And he's since become more of a friend at this point. But it was funny because it was very difficult for me to interview. And I remember asking him a question, something along the lines of well, how do you develop discipline? He said, you just be more disciplined. like, do you care to elaborate on that? He's like,
Yeah.
no, you just be more disciplined. And I'm like, oh, what a weak answer. But actually,
Yeah.
it's not. That is the answer.
Yeah.
How do I become a better father? You act like a better father today.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How do I be a better, more engaged husband? You engage with your wife. How do I write a book? You write the book.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do I become stronger? You lift weights.
Yeah.
How do I get better at waking up early in the morning? You wake up early in the morning. It's not it sounds like a cop out, but you just get better at what you practice.
Right.
So if you practice the excuses of, let's say, getting out of bed early, oh, I'm tired, oh, I worked out yesterday, oh, I need more sleep. If you practice those excuses, you will get better at coming up with excuses to get you out of the work that you want to do. And then the problem is that in 3 or 4 or 5 hours, when you actually wake up, you're going to feel guilty and feel like shit for
Yep.
not doing it.
Yeah.
So, how do you get more proficient at it? When the alarm goes off, you force yourself to get out of bed, and it sucks. And tomorrow it sucks a little bit less, and tomorrow it sucks a little bit less. And then eventually you're like, yeah, I'm an early riser.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not because that was like some preordained destiny that you had, but just because you made it so.
Yes. 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 And we overcomplicate a lot, I feel like.
Yeah, of
And
course
that's
we
what you're
do.
talking about. Yeah.
People are doing that now. They're listening to us now, and they're like, "Well, yeah, but Ryan, I really am a night owl.
Yeah.
I really do have this hard thing." Well, okay, and
Yeah.
everybody has baggage and crap they need to deal
Yeah.
with.
Yeah.
You can overcome it if you want, or you can continue to make excuses. Like, I don't care. People say, "Well, Ryan, what about this situation? My situation's this, and I got all these unique circumstances." I don't like, with all due respect, I don't care. I'm not living with your choices. If you want to
Right.
keep telling yourself that you don't have time to work out, I don't care.
Right.
Cool. And I don't have to live with your diabetes.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you
The
have to live with
results.
that.
Hmm.
So like, are you trying to convince me that, like, or get me to tell you it's okay? I don't care.
Yeah.
I mean, I want you to win. I want you to thrive, but like, your excuses don't matter to me.
Yeah.
So, okay, drive
Yeah.
on. Like, if you're happy with what it is, then
Drive
okay.
on, brother.
If you're not, then do something different.
Yes. Yes. And it really is nice when it's just that black and white, that clear. Um, and I'd say this very last little piece before we wrap up here. I feel like
Can I say something? One more thing on that, though.
please. Yeah. Yeah. Please
Sorry, I'm kind of like going off on this stuff, but
do
like
it.
getting on my soapbox a little bit. But
Go.
you say
Go.
it's kind of nice when it's black and white. It's actually not.
Hmm.
It's not nice. And what I'm interpreting nice as is comfortable.
Mm.
It's not, because now you don't have an excuse.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I just stripped away every excuse that you could have.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's not comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And so what people try to do is they try to complicate things and make things more complex than they need to be, so they can have little excuses and a little bit of wiggle room to back
Chicken
themselves
anklets.
out of doing the work that they know they need to be doing. If it was just simple and everybody just bought into the idea that it was simple, there's no excuse for mediocrity.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we complicate the situations and circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
And then when somebody actually comes and holds a mirror in front of your face and says, "Look, you idiot, it's simple. Do this." Oh, Ryan, you don't know my situation. You don't know my background. You don't know my experience. You don't know this. No, I know it, because over the past 5.5 years, I've heard everything. I already know what you're going to say. I know your personality. I know about your thing that you think is unique. I know. And it isn't as unique as you think it is. You're not as special as you think you are.
Mm-hmm.
It's simple. And as soon as you believe that it's simple, then you'll do it. But if you keep telling yourself it's hard to lose weight. No, it isn't. It's not hard to lose weight. You just have to eat a little bit less and or a little bit better and move your body a little bit more. That's not hard.
Right.
But you want to make it hard. Oh, well, that's just because I don't have the right program. No, it isn't. It's not about the program. Stop making it difficult. Stop telling it's hard to get up in the morning. Yeah, because you tell yourself it's hard.
Correct.
It's not hard.
Correct.
Make it easy. Or just live with the results of you keep telling yourself it's hard. And that's fine too.
Right.
But at least be truthful with yourself about it.
Right. And why this is such a healthy conversation is because, again, I feel like with the meetings that I do, I would say every single meeting, there's a couple guys that always hit me up. Maybe it's their first or second meeting. And they're like, what's so amazing is I got to sit around with other guys and hear that there's other guys feeling the way that I've been feeling or going through the same stuff that I've been going through,
Yeah,
And
for
I think
sure.
that's probably
the power
why,
of brotherhood.
yeah. And I feel like that's why it's your message, your forum, everything is so powerful, because you say a lot of what guys are either scared to say, but they don't even maybe have the words to put it in or be able to articulate into words that they're feeling. But I think that's what's so powerful about you, is that you simplify it, distill it down, but then you actually have the balls to say it.
Yeah, nobody's ever told him that. So I had a guy reach out to me on Instagram the other day, and so are you familiar with Spartan races at all?
Sure, done several. Yep.
Okay, okay. So I did several years ago, 3 or 4 years ago now. I did the Spartan Agoge, which is a 60-hour endurance event,
Wow.
and it was awesome. It was cool.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
painful. It sucked. It was miserable, but it was awesome.
Yeah.
I actually think it's probably more awesome than it actually was. We have a tendency of remembering things better than they really were.
Yeah. Right.
But no, it was a good experience. And this guy reached out to me and he said, "Hey man, I know you did the Spartan Agoge several years ago, and I'm thinking about doing it, and I just wanted your input." I'm like, I wrote back. I said, "Look, man, you don't need my input. Like, there's nothing. You've already made your decision.
Yeah.
Well, there's nothing I could tell you that would help you move you one way or the other. Like,
Yeah.
if you're," and I told him this. I said, "If you're interested in doing it, just sign up for it. I'm not going to tell you about it. I'm not going to tell you what it was or what my experience was. If it sounds interesting and it sounds like something you want to do, then just commit to it and just do it."
Just go. Yep. Yep.
And so the thing that we have to be careful of, especially when we congregate in tribes or groups or packs or bands, whatever you want to call them, is that we think we're moving the needle because we're talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying talking about it is bad. It's not. We need to talk about it. But if that talk comes at the expense of the action, it's a problem. And so we could very easily fall into these therapy sessions where we're like, "Oh yeah, we're talking about all this stuff. It's really good." And then what? I used to have a friend of mine. We were in the financial planning business together. I would tell him things. He'd say, "Therefore what?" I'm like, "Dude, stop saying that. It was so annoying. Stop telling me therefore what." And now I look at it and I'm like, I realize the beauty of what he was saying. It's a very powerful statement. You're telling me all this stuff. So what? So what? What are you going to do with it? So what? And that's what guys need to do for each other, is not like, "Hey, let's hold hands and sing Kumbaya." It's like, okay, well, that's your problem. Okay. And
Yep.
what are you going to do about it? That's the kind of brothers I want in my circle. Not the
Totally.
ones who be like, "Oh yeah, that must be hard."
Yeah.
That's a feminine approach. It's not wrong necessarily.
Right.
The masculine approach is like, "Yeah, that sucks. How are you going to fix it?"
Right. Yeah.
And then drives you to action.
So true. And I've talked about that before, where the feminine responds to praise and the masculine responds to challenge. And so it is great to actually be able to get out and be like, "Oh, I'm not the only one feeling this way." But that is where the rubber meets the road. I feel like with the guys that I work with here in Denver, it's like, it's the mastermind. It's the going out into the woods and doing adventures. It's actually seeing how you can gauge yourself week to week, month to month, quarter to quarter to see there's progress. Otherwise, we're just sitting around, like you said, holding hands, singing Kumbaya, and there's no real leveling up there. It just feels good in the moment. It feels like getting in and out of the hot tub, and it only lasts for 1 or 2 hours that we're there, right?
Right.
So
that's I remember in like competitive sports when I was in high school, if I missed a block or missed a play, you feel like crap about it. But then what makes you feel really bad about it is you let the team down.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, you let that guy down because you failed to make your block, or you failed to roll up that double play. Like, you failed and you let the team down. And a lot of people, especially in modern culture and popular culture, will say, "Oh, well, that's bad. You don't want to make people feel bad." No, like, you should feel bad. You messed up. Like, again, no negative emotions. Even guilt is a positive emotion. Like, when I missed a play or missed a block, I felt guilty because I let the team down and maybe we lost the game or gave up a run or whatever. And then it drove me to drill and get better so I didn't do that next time. And that's part of the power of a brotherhood, is somebody who's not just like, "Oh, tell me about your problems," but saying, "Hey, Johnny, you said you were going to do these 5 things last week and you only did 4 of them. And what about that 5th one?
Yeah.
Like, you told me you were going to do that. You let the team, like, we're all working together. Like, all of us were at 100% and you're at 80. What's up with that, bro?"
Yeah.
That's what we need.
Accountability.
Because nobody else is going to do that for us.
Right. I feel like in that sense, if we collectively as a brotherhood don't do that, then we continue to stay comfortable in that nice
What's the point of a
environment.
brotherhood?
Right. And then you end up just passing the buck to the next generation to actually do something about it.
Right, because look, if you don't do that, let's say there's 5 of us, all right, and we have these things we're going to do on a daily basis, and 4 of us hit 100%. and let's say we'll put the blame on me this time. I hit 80% of the 5 guys. If you're not willing to hold my feet to the fire, then my performance isn't going to get better. And that's not actually where it ends. Your performance is going to get worse because then the next week you're going to be like, oh yeah, Ryan got 80 and nobody called him out. Like it didn't seem to be a big deal. And I've been busy. So I guess like 80% is okay. It's not acceptable. Anything less than 100% is unacceptable to the team. And if you don't make it unacceptable, then you're actually encouraging what you're tolerating, which is performance less than you're capable of. Yes.
Yep.
So everybody, it's not that I don't get to improve. It's that everybody else gets worse because you weren't willing to call it out. There's a lot of rules and things that need to come into play, and I'm sure you have these types of things, these boundaries and expectations built into your programs that facilitate this. But anything less than 100% is not acceptable.
Right.
It's got to be 100. Right. 100 or nothing. And look, if you mess up a week, cool. All right, you messed up. Get back to 100. If you do it 2 weeks, I'm a little hesitant about you. If you do it 3 weeks, you're gone, man. You're not committed.
Yeah.
I need somebody who's committed to this process.
Yeah.
I need 100% out of me, you, and everybody in this group. And if you're not going to do 100, I'll find someone who's going to do 100. And sometimes that little bit of fear is what drives people to do 100, which is fine too.
Yeah. You sound like Michael Jordan from The Last Dance.
I don't know.
Have you watched it all?
No, I haven't seen it.
But that's exactly right. And that's what he set the bar. It was like he was a Navy SEAL, and he was like, this is our team. And if you can't handle this in practice, the fire in practice that I bring to you and the razzing and the talking, the shit that I bring you, then there's no way in hell you're going to rise to the level of performance I need you to be in a game 7 against Isaiah Thomas or Magic Johnson. There's like the dude just set a very, very high standard in practice so that it translated to on court. And you're talking about the same thing. That's how the brotherhood, I feel like, can support each other so that when shit really hits the fan in marriage or COVID or whatever, because it's bound, that's just how life is. You're absolutely right. It's just that's where guys need to level up. Otherwise, there's a weak link and the entire team suffers,
No doubt.
Yeah.
No doubt.
Well, thank you so much for having, some time just for popping on the podcast and being here with me.
Of course, man.
You give me so many good things that I want to throw into my book and give you credit for, but I really appreciate you and just the work that you're doing and the stand that you, kind of the example that you show as the standard for, what's possible for guys to achieve. And I know it always keeps leveling up, but it's just nice to have guys that are holding everyone else to a higher standard. So I honor you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, man. I appreciate the opportunity. Great conversation. Really fun to talk with you. Appreciate it.
Awesome, brother. Appreciate it. Take care.